Listening skill. Listening for contrasting ideas. A. Page 134.
Bob Quintero and Susan Miyamoto are the final candidates for the marketing position at our company. Bob has a degree from Harvard University in the USA, whereas Susan has a degree from Keio Business School in Japan.
Bob and Susan both have good work experience. Bob has worked for 5 years at a small marketing company, but Susan has worked for 8 years at our company.
Susan speaks more languages. Bob speaks Arabic and Spanish. However, Susan speaks French, Spanish, and Japanese.
Bob has a lot of sales experience. On the other hand, Susan has a lot of experience at our company.
This is going to be a tough decision.
Listening skill. Listening carefully to an introduction. A. Page 179.
Hello. Today I want to continue our discussion about the impact of human behavior, specifically pollution, on the environment. I want to draw your attention to the effect humans are having on one of the smaller animals with which we share the planet, honeybees. You might be thinking, why should we care about honeybees? Well, in the first part of this lecture, I'll explain the important role honeybees play in our daily lives. You might be surprised to find out just how vital their health is to you. In the second half of the lecture, I'll review some recent research on how pollution in the environment is causing flowers to lose their smell. I'll also talk about how the bees are confused by this lack of smell. Finally, we'll finish up today with my predictions for the future for bees and consequently for humans. Okay? Let's get started.
Listening to Myths of Effective Leadership. Listen for main ideas. Page 11.
Podcasts from the Leading Effectively series are provided by the Center for Creative Leadership, an educational institution dedicated exclusively to leadership development and research worldwide. Information available at www.ccl.org. Today's topic, Myths of Effective Leadership.
There's a difference between leadership and power. Successful executives know that difference and lead their teams more effectively because of it. Unfortunately, many executives on the rise in an organization forget the leadership skills and contacts that put their careers on track in the first place. A study by the Center for Creative Leadership shows that as executives advance in a company, they begin to blur the lines between leadership, power, and influence. They see themselves as more intelligent and capable than those around them in the organization. They see people who agree with them as more capable, intelligent, and ethical than those who might disagree. The result? Executives get affirmation from a small, expected group, which inflates their idea of how powerful and influential they are among the people who work with them. Their influence becomes constricted, and their leadership erodes. Some people overtly use power to accomplish their goals, says CCL's Pete Hammett, who is also the author of Unbalanced Influence. He says others become used to having tools of power, such as the ability to dictate and set agendas. Over time, that access to power distorts an executive's influence in the organization. They may have the title and power, but their disenfranchised team members won't see them as an effective leader. Those with different opinions choose to remain silent, or they leave. With them, they take away a whole range of ideas. CCL and Hammett recommend that executives calibrate their spheres of influence and see whether their team members perceive them as leaders or merely as suits with powerful titles. Here are 3 ways to proceed. Number 1, find and listen to other voices. A leader should keep in touch with new ideas and fresh perspectives. If all you're hearing is one voice, then invite others to the conversation and let them know you really want to hear them. Number 2, find a sparring partner. Find someone who's comfortable and capable of taking an opposing point of view. That doesn't mean you should seek out every malcontent in an operation. It means you should find someone who is intelligent, thoughtful, and open to tackling a discussion from an opposing view. Don't be seen as a leader who refuses to listen to different ideas, or worse, one who penalizes people for suggesting them. Number 3, leadership can be cultivated, but only in a self-aware person. Sign up for a leadership program. Get some feedback that assesses your leadership style. Make a point to hold a mirror up to your conversations and interactions within your organization. Only by seeing yourself through others' eyes can you go from someone who holds power to someone who leads.
B. Page 135. Listen again to Listening 1.
Listening 2. The effects of oil spills. Listen for main ideas. Page 182.
Good morning. Today we'll continue to look at the way humans affect the environment. This class will focus on the Exxon Valdez oil spill, one of the largest oil spills in U.S. history. The Exxon Valdez was an oil tanker, a ship that carries large amounts of oil. It ran aground in Prince William Sound in Alaska in 1989. It released about 11 million gallons of oil into the water and onto the beaches. Many oil spills around the world have been bigger, but the Valdez oil spill has emerged as among the most serious in terms of its environmental impact. I'll explain why. I'm also going to talk about some methods used to deal with oil spills. The oil spill in Prince William Sound has been particularly difficult to clean up, and efforts to restore the environment there are expected to continue indefinitely. We continue to learn a great deal about the different approaches to this problem from those efforts. All right, so first some background on the spill. On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez oil tanker hit a rocky area called Bly Reef in the northeast part of Prince William Sound. The reef tore open the ship, spilling oil into the water. When the oil spilled, the weather was calm. But after 3 days, a storm moved in, and the wind started to disperse the oil down the shoreline. As the wind blew the oil and water together, the oil changed into a thick substance called mousse. That's M-O-U-S-S-E, which is very sticky and very difficult to remove from the water and the beaches. The oil continued to spread and move along the shoreline, and it gradually affected about 1,300 miles of beach altogether. If you look at a map of Prince William Sound, you see that there are several islands there. Some of these, like Cordova Island and Green Island, have small communities in which many people work in businesses related to fishing, especially salmon fishing. The Sound is also home to other species of fish, such as herring and pollock, and to sea otters, seals, and many species of sea birds. So, why did this spill have such a serious environmental impact? The features of Prince William Sound are big factors. The Sound is very cold and relatively enclosed. It has a very rocky shoreline and a narrow opening out to the open waters of the Pacific Ocean. The very cold water caused the oil to stay in the Sound and sink into the rocks and sand and below the surface of the water. The enclosed area kept the oil from spreading into the open ocean water. This kept the damaging effects of the oil in a small area. In addition, the water in Prince William Sound is very calm most of the time. We know that ocean waves can break down oil so it's not so toxic, but there aren't usually big waves in the Sound. Now let's look at the short-term environmental impact. What happened right after the oil spilled? Thousands of oil-coated birds, seals, and fish began dying on the blackened beaches and in the oil-covered water. Volunteers rushed in to try to save the birds and animals by cleaning them. But in the days that followed the spill, it's estimated that 250 bald eagles, 250,000 seabirds, 2,800 sea otters, 300 harbor seals, and billions of salmon eggs died. One reason the animals died was from the cold. When oil gets onto animals and birds, their fur and feathers cannot keep them warm. Their body temperatures drop, and they die. As the days went on, many more birds, seals, and sea otters suffered injuries. And oil is very toxic. Many animals died or became ill from swallowing oil as they hunted for food. The people there were deeply affected as well. For example, the shores of Green Island were covered in crude oil. Individuals who fished for a living were hit especially hard. So many fish died that some fisheries had to close. Now let's look at the long-term environmental impact. Hundreds of studies have been conducted since 1989. Scientists are starting to understand how complicated the recovery of Prince William Sound is. Although the Sound looks beautiful again, the environment there is still in deep trouble. A recent report presented some of the continuing problems. One big problem is that there is still a large amount of oil there. As much as 20,000 gallons of the Exxon Valdez oil is still trapped in the Sound, deep in the water and on the beaches. Researchers have dug holes on the shore between 5 inches and 1 foot. That's between 10 and 30 centimeters below the surface. They have found layers of oil still in the sand. Some species, such as the sea otter, dig in the sand for food. The sea otters often come into contact with the toxic oil, even now, many years after it was released. Another problem is the large number of animals still suffering the consequences of the spill. Killer whales, salmon, herring, and other species were all injured by the oil spill. Scientists are tracking these animals. They found that the salmon are recovering, but salmon born from eggs exposed to the oil are smaller than salmon born before the spill. The Sound's commercial herring fishery completely collapsed within a few years. Many of the inhabitants of the Sound are still feeling the impact. The herring and salmon populations still haven't returned to what they were before the spill, and some of the fisheries still haven't reopened. And the killer whale has been hit especially hard. Killer whales live in groups called pods. At the time of the oil spill, one pod had 22 members. The spill killed 9 whales within the first year, and 5 more died after 1990. Since then, there have been no births in the pod. 0. This pod is in serious trouble. Another pod, fortunately, is beginning to slowly recover. Scientists think most of the dead whales died from breathing in toxic fumes from the oil, or from eating harbor seals that were covered in oil. Thousands of harbor seals died right away, but their numbers have finally started to increase again. So it's clear that the environmental impact of the Valdez oil spill, both short and long-term, was serious. Thousands of animals suffered immediately following the spill, and some species are still feeling the effects more than 2 decades later. Now let's consider how to deal with oil spills. A lot of research has been done on ways to clean up an oil spill. We know it's important to respond as soon as a spill occurs. Oil can spread quickly and cause a lot of damage in a short time. There is a variety of equipment that can be used to keep the oil from spreading and to remove it from the surface of the water. There are also chemicals that can be used to treat the oil and remove it. We also know that animals can die quickly from an oil spill, and that washing the oil off affected birds and animals can improve their odds of survival. I mentioned earlier that right after the Exxon Valdez spill, thousands of people went to the nearby beaches to try to rescue the birds and other animals. With the Exxon Valdez oil spill, the first cleanup response was to use a chemical mixture to try to disperse the oil. This didn't work because there weren't enough waves to mix the water and the chemicals. Remember, the water in Prince William Sound is often calm, and so they had to try something else. Next, they tried to use very hot water to remove the oil from the shoreline. However, they learned that this was a bad idea because the hot water killed bacteria on the shore that could have actually helped break down the oil. They went on to try other methods. The cleanup effort was huge. It lasted for 4 summers. There were about 10,000 workers in 1,000 boats. The cost? About $2.1 billion. Since the Valdez spill, researchers have been trying to develop better methods for dealing with oil spills. For example, they have developed a chemical that promotes the growth of the bacteria that help break down the oil. To me, this is a positive step. because it's a way to use what we know about how nature works to repair the damage we as human beings have caused. Of course, the best way to stop the damage caused by oil spills is to stop the spills from happening in the first place. Next time, we'll talk about some of the improvements that have been made to oil tankers and the way they are used. But right now, does anyone have any questions?